This is video 2 of Tesla Limited. We have looked at the given information and are now looking at the first required. So required says write a memorandum. Now memorandum has a specific format, and that is why there are format marks allocated to this memorandum. So write this memorandum to the accountant of Tesla in which you address the following questions. There are 2 questions, so there's a part A and a part B in this required. So if we look at required A, it asks, does the transaction between Tesla and the South Australian government meet the criteria to be a contract accounted for in terms of IFRS 15, and we give the name of the standard revenue from contracts with customers? When are we asking? During Tesla's third quarter, which ends 30 September. Motivate your answer with reference to the IFRS 15, and then very important, they give you a note. Now, IFRS 15 is quite a broad standard, so we always try to narrow it down because otherwise you can write a lot. So you have to look at the note to see how we try to narrow it down. What do you need to discuss? Another thing that is important to look at is the mark allocation and the time allocation because of the marks, just to give you an indication of how much you need to write. So if we look at the note part, it says a discussion of the definition of a customer is not required. A discussion of the definition of a contract is not required. A discussion of the scope is not required. And do not discuss unilateral enforceable rights. So if you do discuss those things, they will not count marks because we specifically excluded them. So you will be wasting time if you go and discuss these things. So let's have a look now that we know what not to discuss. What should we actually discuss? So when answering a theory question, the first thing you need to do is identify the theory in the standard, the most relevant theory applicable to answer the required. So what they asked us is this a contract? The agreement between Tesla and the South Australian government, is it a contract in terms of IFRS 15? So paragraph 9 in IFRS 15 is applicable. And that paragraph says an entity shall account for a contract with a customer that is within the scope of the standard only when all of the following criteria are met. And that word criteria was also in the required. So if you just look at this one line, you might want to discuss, but what is a contract? Because it says an entity shall account for a contract. Okay, but what is a contract? And you might want to say, what is a customer? Because they say a contract with a customer. And you might want to discuss the scope of this standard because it says that is within the scope of the standard. And because of that, in the note part of the required, we specifically said, do not discuss the definition of a customer, do not discuss the definition of a contract, and do not discuss the scope of the standard, because you might have wanted to do that because they are defined in IFRS 15. So we try to narrow it down to paragraph 9, and you don't need to go wider out again. Right, so what are these criteria that we need to comply with? Well, the first one says the parties to the contract have approved the contract, and that approval can either be in writing or orally or in accordance with any other customary business practices. And then there's an and, so there's a second part that you need to answer. And the parties are committed to perform their respective obligations. The second criteria, the entity can identify each party's rights regarding the goods or services to be transferred. Number C, the entity can identify the payment terms for the goods or services to be transferred. Number D, the contract has commercial substance. Now, what does that mean? It means that the entity, Tesla in this case, needs to be in a different position. Something must have changed because of this contract. If they are no better and no worse off before and after the contract, nothing has changed, then the contract does not have commercial substance. So that is one of the criteria that need to be met. The contract has commercial substance. The last one, it is probable that the entity will collect the consideration to which it will be entitled in exchange for the goods or services that will be transferred to the customer. In evaluating whether collectability of an amount is probable, an entity shall consider only the customer's ability and intention to pay that amount of consideration when it is due. So these are the criteria, and paragraph 9 says all the criteria need to be met, not some of them or one of them. It's not this one or that one or that one or that one. It's all of the criteria, all 5 of them. Okay, so before we have a look at how to now apply these criteria, just a few things I still want to mention. If you look at paragraph 10, paragraph 10 is the definition of a contract. A contract is. Do we need to discuss that? No, because it was specifically excluded in the required of this question. Paragraph 12 says, a contract does not exist if each party to the contract has the unilateral enforceable right to terminate. Okay? Do we need to discuss that? No, because it was specifically excluded in the required of the question. So as you can see, in the note part, we try and limit what you need to answer, what you need to discuss, so that the required of the question is answered.